Hey guys, welcome to episode 3 of the Prospect Podcast. I am Ken Boothalier. Today, I'm joined by one of my clients, Derek Fernholz. The reason why I wanted to bring Derek in, we helped him purchase a house earlier this year, and through that, we educated each other quite a bit. Me from the housing side, obviously, and Derek is a crypto and NFT guy. In my mind, a guru. Some of you may or may not disagree, but I don't know anything about it. So that's why I thought it'd be a great opportunity to bring Derek in and chat a little bit. Derek, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ken. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So to get things off and really dumb it down, how would you explain crypto to me, old man yelling at the sky, not knowing, really understanding it?
Taking it from about 30,000 feet down to one sentence, I'd say the same way that you would log on to a DraftKings or a FanDuel or any type of way that you go online and load money into an online platform and have that be a virtual currency. Let's think about that as the general guardrails for how we deal with crypto, right? So it's going to be an asset that you have that is basically all digital, but tied back to a blockchain on the back end that's going to be your security and your vulnerability protection on the back end. So instead of it being a fiat currency and actually being able to trade dollars and cents back and forth, hand to hand, we're going to do it the same way as we would do a Venmo transaction back and forth between me and you. It's just instead of that Venmo transaction being backed by dollars and cents, which is what we're used to, it's going to be backed by Bitcoin or backed by Ethereum or a digital currency to move that money back and forth.
So most people, like my initial reaction would be, well, what is it backed by, right? You have everything else, backed by the faith of the U.S. government or whatever it is. What is backing crypto? What is it behind the scenes that for somebody like me might be a bit of a pessimist going, why? How is this not just made up bullshit and pretend? Well, what is backing it? What is creating it? The
antagonistic question to say is what's backing the U.S. dollar right now at the same point, right?
100%.
So we'll get into this a little bit down the road in the bigger conversation about proof of work versus proof of stake and what Ethereum is doing right now to change to Ethereum 2.0 and try to clean all that up from an energy and a cost perspective. And the biggest draw on it being what we're doing with the environment and how cost effective and energy production on the Bitcoin side it takes to actually mine a coin, right? So the initial setup and how we got here in the first place was there were complex puzzles that were hashed out between these Bitcoin miners to prove that they're putting energy and time and consumption into generating the value behind the Bitcoin. To a guy like you who is just getting into the game, that probably doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot, right? So I'll just bring it back to that comment as we're not on the gold standard here for dollars anymore either, right? So what a currency is and what is traded via value back and forth from person to person, there's a little bit of intrinsic in that depending on where we look across the ecosystem.
Sure, right? It's up for, for people to read it, and it seems like it's adapting. And like you said, the U.S. dollar, people can say it's backed by whatever, but what is it really?
Right? Exactly.
It's all just numbers and cents moved around. So you mentioned the Ethereum thing. Let's jump into that. You sent me an article previously about the Ethereum 2.0, read through it, merging, how crypto was, what's crypto going to, and it seems like the catalyst for that is a lot of anti-crypto people and even green energy people are saying that the energy that it takes to run the computing systems to mine for these is so extravagant that, it is just horrible for the environment versus this new way of looking at it. Couple things, again, ignorance. What is it in the matter of computing power that's really having the impact on the environment? And then what is the shift that it's going to, and what is Ethereum kind of bringing together with the two models? It seems like they've been running in parallel for a while, and now they're cleaning it up.
I think they've been running in parallel since 2016, if I remember right. But it's the foundational Bitcoin and the foundational Ethereum were built on this proof of work model, which is what I was explaining in terms of we need massive computer systems and massive investment to actually go and do the computing process to solve these ever more complex problems to hash out and give you the reward of the Bitcoin on the back end in order to bring more into circulation. That is the proof on the back end of how we validate and actually make it decentralized away from it being a normal bank ledger where there's going to be U.S. banks sitting there making sure that when dollars go in, dollars come out. That's a centralized bank ledger, right? We all understand how that works. What we're doing on the Bitcoin side is decentralizing all of that and not having it run back through one individual person or institution. So in order to do that, you need to incentivize volunteers or people to jump into that ecosystem and be the ones to do that work, per se, to validate everything that's happening on the blockchain. all those dollars coming in, all those dollars coming out, or all those transactions are going to be validated and rewarded by the people that put this work in with the massive computing power.
And that's how it's worked now historically.
Correct.
And that's where your green energy people or your crypto naysayers are saying the energy, just strictly the electricity and energy to do it is the issue.
So it's on an exponential scale, right? So my validation as to why I think we're having this conversation is back when I was in college, we were actually mining Bitcoin in our college dorm room. So when we were doing that, and that was 2012, 2013, all you needed was an Alienware gaming PC, and that had enough power to do a slow drip, but we were mining Bitcoin.
Interesting.
Nowadays, as this become more complex and there's less coins available, the computing power needed to do those problems or to bring those solutions and hash those new coins out of the market is just getting harder, right? So now you're seeing these people that have basements with fans and multiple server racks. You can't get graphics cards for people that are trying to play gaming computers anymore because they're all selling out and they're all going to these people who have massive setups in their basement that are just pumping energy to mine Bitcoin.
Interesting. So now that's caused the shift to, we say, the stakeholder model. How does that differentiate? Because I saw some of the articles say that Ethereum is now going to run 95% cleaner than what it once did by adopting this.
Yeah. So instead of having to put the computing power and the work and the actual physical energy into it, you're going to be able to do it with the coins that you already own. So you're going to stake your own personal coins and your own personal Ethereum on that transaction and buy your way into being the person that gets that reward. So it becomes more of an investment vehicle on the stake side of it than it does on the work side of it, because if you have the coins to stake and put, I think the number's 34 Ethereum to buy your way into it, then you can get that reward on the back end for those transactions going through and you being the one that validates it because you bought in on the front end. So it no longer requires that basement full of servers to run and push that energy and solve that complex problem. It's now a dollars and cents game, which takes the guardrails off it for people in our shoes or us in the younger side of the market as well, that don't have 50, 60K in Ethereum to go stake and put that at risk, right? We can now buy into that on a fractional percentage, similar to what you're doing with like a Fidelity on those stock splits that you can do in regular investing now, and let people get into the game on the proof of stake side for thousands of dollars and even hundreds of dollars.
So basically now you've created an investment tool that is trading on the stock market, the people buying into that. So purchasing mortgage-backed securities that are bundled together, you're purchasing your way into something else that is, and now that has an intrinsic value, but you're also then getting value from the crypto side.
You're close to it. There's a little bit different because it's still going to be regulated in your silos of each coin to stake it up. So like I'm going to have my Ethereum versus my Cardano holdings, which are both on the smart contract and DeFi side of the world. I can get 3% back on my Ethereum, where I can get 5% back on my Cardano based on how much money I put up, right? And that's going to be based on the success that can come back out of those, or the risk that's going to come back in the pool of people that are putting up that initial 34K.
So with Ethereum doing this, are we going to see a shift where your Bitcoin and your other big names in crypto are forced to do the same thing? Or is it going to be like, no, we're staying the course where we're at?
So we're right in the middle of that right now, right? Okay. This merge happened 30, 45 days ago, and the Ethereum coin jumped and reacted to it in a positive way, right? Because all of these smart contracts and all of the infrastructure that's being built on top of the Ethereum network, the main drawback to that was how high the gas fees were, how much it was to process each transaction, where people wouldn't even want to sell their Ethereum last year because it was so much to process the transaction. You're paying $40, $50 in fees just to sell. Wow. Versus now, if we clean that up and that gas fees and the efficiency goes way down, not only the likelihood that your transaction is going to go through and be clean or 100% or nearer to it, right? But it's going to be less expensive and less energy efficient and all of that, or excuse me, more energy efficient to make that easier to transact.
So is your speculation then that Bitcoin and those are going to be forced to go that route at some point?
Well, so I'm a Ethereum fanboy, right? So I'm all in on Ethereum over even the Bitcoin side of it, mainly because of the structure of the coin, right? So the Bitcoin side of it, the Satoshi Nakamoto side, where he wrote the paper and there's no head of the coin, truly decentralized. Awesome. That's the foundation for what we're doing here. The Ethereum side has I can't get his name wrong all the time, but the VB guy who runs it, Vitalik, I say it wrong every time, right? But he's the head of the coin still and the face of the coin. So he can drive changes like this, that Bitcoin just can't fundamentally and structurally do because of it not being driven and just like having a quote unquote CEO of the coin, right? It's the downside and the positive of it, because now the decentralized aspect of it and not having one person in charge of the Ethereum network, that's your downside. But we can react and we can do this A/B testing over the last 5 years as to proof of stake or proof of work, which one's going to be better, and make that strategic decision to improve the coin over the long term.
So as of now, is it where you're kind of old school crypto hardos that basically just have a hard on for the decentralized portion of it are staying Bitcoin loyalists, and then guys like yourself that are adapting a little bit more or seeing kind of long road are willing to try some of the newer things?
Pretty much. And it wouldn't even say that Ethereum qualifies that as being the cutting edge, because that's still one of the two monsters in the industry, right? As
Sure.
you get to some of these startups or these ICOs that people are pushing out that all have their own unique utility as to what they're doing. Are they DeFi? Are they smart contracts? There are hundreds, if not thousands, of coins you could go out and invest in right now. Each has a little different niche and a little different tweak to what they're doing. Um, how many of those are going to be around in 5, 10 years? That's a real question as well.
Sure. And that's something that, so I think the terminology and some of those people call them shit coins, right? So I'm not in crypto. I mean, I bought crypto one time, and full disclosure, I'm a Barstool guy, Portnoy guy, whatever. And what was that? A year or so ago, he came out and he picked his shit coin of choice and he picked SafeMoon. I was like, what the hell was? So I put like, basically a good Sunday night football bet on SafeMoon that is now worth, I think, like $13 in what it is. So from the outsider's perspective, like you said, these hundreds of Bitcoins are being created and turning up, and SafeMoon got some legs because they have some creative social media stuff going. Obviously, you get a guy like Portnoy who just says it on a whim as content and then gets volume. How is it for the average consumer that wants to start getting into Bitcoin to really differentiate between, yeah, your two big dogs and all this other shit?
Each of the coins that come out are going to have a white paper, are going to have a marketing pitch almost behind it, right? So you're going to be able to go out and do your own research and see what the team that published the coin wants to accomplish with that specific token. So you're going to be able to go in and do your own research and get the information that you need to make an educated decision. The fun part of the game is who's necessarily telling the exact truth in what they're publishing online, right? So think of it like the .com investment game of a little bit while ago. Like, you can tell a good story, you can have a good foundation, you can get some decent outside investment without really proving that you can accomplish or execute anything. And we're in kind of a sweet spot. And the comment that is coming here in 2 questions probably about the market kind of falling off is, when we were in the heat of it a year ago or a year and a half ago in the middle of COVID, where everybody had time and everybody could learn about these new things, you're seeing new things pop up on Twitter. Everybody started watching Twitch for the first time. And like you, Portnoy's telling you about SafeMoon.
Yep.
You go, is it a gamble at this point, or is it an investment, right?
Sure.
And there's a lot of people on both sides of the fence, me included, right, where I'm doing some safe investing stuff with the Bitcoin and the Ethereum and hedging that against my 401k. There's also a piece of what I'm doing with the altcoins or the shit coins, like you said, where throwing a couple $100 at some of them and hope they hit up 15x and I cash it out right away.
And that's really a different approach than most people that are in your traditional stock market, right? You have your guys that are in your 401ks or have a financial advisor that have this money being planned and working for them in a specific way. Then they might also have 50 grand on the side that they have in their Fidelity account. They're like, well, fuck around, let's see what happens,
yeah,
right? And you're doing it, and everyone you're treating like a gamble, right? You made the FanDuel analogy earlier, right? You're like, you know what? So and so is going to do such and such tonight. Let's do it. And I see both aspects of that, and bringing on that, and again with how hard it is to cipher through what's what, who's telling the truth. Are there crypto financial advisors now? Or is that becoming a thing? Or is there a need for that to where your average citizen still doesn't understand the stock market fully? Say they rely on their financial advisor. Obviously, a drastic higher percentage of the population probably doesn't understand crypto. Why aren't there financial advisors, or are there, that just specialize in that?
They're starting right now,
Okay.
right? So one of the big news stories that I wrote down for you coming in here this week was Fidelity is actually adding Bitcoin to their 401k offerings. So you're gonna be able to go on the Fidelity platform here in the next couple, I think it was 6 months to a year, and then be able to buy Bitcoin as part of your 401k investment on the same Fidelity platform. So that's going to be a huge move for mass adoption to play that against what's happening with individual retail investors right now, all pulling their money out of the exchanges. How does the dynamic shift, or how does the investment vehicle shift once they have access to do it with their quote unquote real money and their real investment money inside of the Fidelity platform?
Sure.
There's going to be a huge learning curve, I think, in terms of the advisors and how they pitch it or how they position it against a traditional investment. I can speak to that in personal terms because even my buddies who I went to college with, I work with on the financial side for my retirement accounts as well. They're not on board with me investing in crypto, right? I don't know if it's they don't understand it or they have seen so much success on the other side of the fence. I don't think that they hold a ton of crypto themselves, right? The guys that are in that industry day in, day out. Is that them missing the boat? I think so a little bit, just because how can you not hedge this at the age of under 35 against what you're doing for a
Sure.
30-year horizon? Like you got to
Does
look
that
at
become an SEC thing though, as well, as far as, they're only allowed to trade in SEC stuff, or most only want to stay in their umbrella of protection? So on the mortgage side, it'd be like, I only do QM loans, qualified mortgages. They're covered under this umbrella of federal lending guidelines. I know if I issue a mortgage that hits all these, I'm good. Similar thing on the financial advisor side with SEC. That's a hurdle as well, right? But isn't that having to be bridged with Fidelity offering it as part of their 401k?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're going to see. What's coming down the pipe, right? Is like BlackRock just partnered with Coinbase, who's one of the biggest exchanges on the market, who I use myself, right? So how does this all play in, and when do I stop getting the call? Like, I'm kind of talking behind the scenes from my guy, right? Like, he's not obviously able to even recommend individual stock names based on the construction that they have as financial advisors, right? So I'm really interested to see how the tide changes, because us as investors and the general news is died down, so everybody's kind of pulling out on that side, but the institutional investments picking up, right? So the next time this thing heats up again, what are we going to have the ability to do is the open-ended optimism for me.
So obviously volatility has hit our economy across the board, stock market, housing, etc. But I don't think it's any more than what we've seen in crypto, right? Where did Bitcoin peak out at? What was its high? 60 something?
Mid 60s, yeah.
And now we're what, around 19 today?
Less sub 20,
yeah. So somebody's looking at that going, geez, I've had this massive decline in that one asset that we haven't seen in the stock market since, it's been a long time, 15 years or whatever it is. Housing, same time frame that we've seen something. And those events are very much one or two off in the history of our country. Crypto has seen a few of those. So what's the response to somebody going, well, geez, I just don't trust the volatility. With that kind of volatility, how can it be a true long-term investment when we're seeing those kinds of swings? Or were those swings through this growing period, and are we finding our way out of that?
I think the majority of the swings and the volatility comes from it being an immature asset, right? And the more money and the larger the market cap gets, you're going to insulate against that. If you look at the size of what you're talking about with the stock market and how it can peak and valley, the amount of money that can be moved, talk about individuals and going back to how there's a head of Ethereum, right? As you guys create these new coins or these ICOs, you can set aside a bunch of that for yourself, right? So I can own 40% of circulating supply of one of these shit coins, get people bought in, build that up to a decent amount of money, and then they call it a rug pull, right? Where somebody will just sell 40% of the circulating assets, take all the money, go home and crash the coin to zero.
What's keeping everybody that has the brain power to do that from doing it?
Are you a good enough con man? Can you trick somebody into buying your asset, right?
But is that, again, you may not even know the answer, but with it not being a regulated thing, is that somebody who does that, or the SEC isn't going to come knock on their door? It's not under their jurisdiction. So what's back to, again, I'm not necessarily a big government guy, but you've got fail safes built in that are often abused. But on this side, we might have, and I don't like regulation in general, but being unregulated or deregulated, doesn't that just open up the possibility for all of that to happen across the board?
Sort of, but when you get into the Ethereums and the Bitcoins and the more mature assets, there's not individual holders that can have that much effect on the entire overall circulating
So
supply.
once it's what
Yeah.
becomes well established, obviously it's less likely to happen. But that means every time you're taking a gamble on your new altcoins or shit coins, that could absolutely happen on.
It can happen on a publicly traded company too, right?
Very
It's like
true.
somebody could come in and decide that I like this company. I'm going to buy it through 4 or 5 shell companies and decide I have 60% of this thing and change the entire direction of the company, right?
Sure.
It's the same thought process. It's just there's no SEC to put the handcuffs on you. But if you have an asset that's got enough energy behind it, I don't think that you have enough capital to do that yourself.
Gotcha. So the juice isn't worth the squeeze necessarily on having to be able to go through it all to pull it off.
Well, and the SEC is sitting there waiting to take their shot, right? It's like
So they need one big one to find the loophole that now all of a sudden make all crypto regulated.
Well, so they got
which is what they're pushing for anyway.
You heard of Ripple, like XRP?
Yes.
They've been tied up since 2020 with the SEC because they raised a bunch of money saying that they had a token that the SEC thinks is a security, or they didn't think it was a security, and now it's been a 2.5-3 year battle on it for them not being able to trade on these publicly available exchanges because they're tied up in an SEC lawsuit.
Interesting. Do you see a point where crypto is going to fall under SEC and be traded just like a NASDAQ, a Dow, another, another of its own exchange and vehicle? I mean, but you hope it doesn't. Well, what's going to, I guess, better question, what was going to keep that from happening?
How do you make it a United States owned thing when it's a global currency, right? Like the reason that we all got into it being optimistic college students was like globalization, everything's coming together, world trade, right? Buying things on the internet from China, you can send them Bitcoin instead of having to go through 3 or 4 switches in terms of how you get your money over there. So inherently the thing was built to break borders. So how can you have a US SEC be the one that's in charge of it? That's a major issue to figure out down the road, especially with what's going on in South America, where you got these countries that are putting their country's money into Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation in their country. What does that do for the global narrative in terms of what Bitcoin is, where you have third world countries being heavy early adopters into this thing? Another bullet point on why I'm an Ethereum fanboy, right? Is like, it's the world of Bitcoin coming down the pipe is one of question for me.
Sure. That's all interesting stuff. And my mind immediately went towards a global SEC, right? Which there's nothing more than, UN, New World Order kind of stuff would love to have.
Right.
Ultimately, that probably ends up being a bad thing, right? But if they're going to regulate it, that's what's going to have to happen, right?
Well, the government's trying to make their own, right? It's like what they want to do is just go around.
They want to have a US dollar that's a crypto.
Yeah,
right?
And then they're going to do the same thing that they're doing, which I don't think is a terrible idea. I think there's some grounds for it in there being like a stable coin or something that's backed heavily off the US dollar. And then they use that stable coin to build foundation for some of these other altcoins or build the network going out. There's a grounds for that, but it's antagonistic to the goals and the community, how we set it up initially, right?
So let's shift a little bit. The other part of crypto being blockchain. So what I've heard on my side of the fence where it's going to impact me and my business daily is the blockchain technology, and people in the real estate industry have said this, that is the true value of what we've seen in crypto is the blockchain and how that's going to impact the tracking of deeds moving from people, all the title work, et cetera, that everything's going to be in a, decentralized blockchain. Touch on, again, break it down for me. What is blockchain? How does it work? And how is it different from just the record keeping we've used traditionally? That has become digital, but it's digital in the aspect that it's documents recorded digitally.
It's about ownership, right? So it's back to that bank ledger example I was talking about with US Bank. Traditionally, you're going to go in and you're going to give them your check. They're going to put it on their centralized ledger that's going to be across all US Bank locations and tell you, all right, you have this much money that if you want to pull it out of the ATM, regardless of where you're at, right? It's the same thing, but it's just not owned by US Bank, right? So how do you make it a decentralized asset and tie it back to the blockchain, which is an uneditable list of events. We're just happening to talking about it with crypto in terms of those events being transactions of dollars, right? Sure. We talk about it in your world. That transaction is a house moving back and forth. Why can't we have the same sort of guidelines or the same sort of uneditable history of what's going from top to bottom on that house as that transaction goes through? So the bigger question about the tokenization in your world is, if you were to sell me the house that I bought from you last year, right? I don't know what happened between when that was built in 1970 and when I bought it in 2022. If we had a blockchain technology that was tied to that house when it was built, every time that there was a repair or any time that the power went out or any time that there was a significant event with that house, it would get logged on the blockchain. So when I bought the house in 2022, I could look back on that 30-year history and know that those events happened at those times. Did it change hands from owner to owner? Did that owner use TJ's construction company, or did they do it themselves when they built the back porch? All of that's going to be locked in, uneditable information for me as a third or fourth stream buyer down the road.
Infrastructure wise, how long, and again, it's just a guess from you, but asking a loaded question, how long does it take to get to a point where everything that we're doing, like you mentioned, I think is a fantastic example, is actually tracked on a blockchain? Because infrastructure-wise, you have to think that'd be massively difficult to change that. I mean, everybody wants to go to electric vehicles across the board, but California mandates it for 2025, and a week later, shuts down their power grids for rolling blackouts, et cetera. So how does that? What kind of runway is that? Is that a 50-year mark that we're there, or is that something that all of a sudden 5 years from now we're going to see to where all the deed history on a house and, like you said, the repairs and all that work is there? How far out is that from being a reality?
How far out are we from Bitcoin becoming generally adopted? We've been sitting on the sidelines for 15 years saying that there were Bitcoin ATMs 5 years ago, the same thing, right? We've been waiting for this to pick up, and even from the crypto side, it just hasn't. So I would think when the change happens, it's going to happen at the snap of a finger, because the infrastructure that you have set up in your industry right now is pretty redundant in terms of how paperwork transfers through hands, having brokers, having escrow, having that whole deal that you guys have. A new firm's going to come in and eliminate all that with the blockchain, because it's not going to need the custody battle of going through a broker or anything on that side of it. So it's going to be a church and state conversation as to, can these guys adapt and change their business model, or is a new firm going to come in and start it from scratch, and these guys can't compete with the traditional model?
Interesting. And obviously there's going to be a ton of battles there, right? We've seen your Zillows, your Open Doors, and things of that of the world that have come in and tried to revolutionize real estate. And at every turn, they seem to cause a problem, then back out. And then guess what? We're back to, hey, the old school way of kind of doing stuff tends to still be the tried and true best way. It's going to be interesting. That's going to happen. It's going to be interesting how it works. My guess would be a Zillow or somebody like that would likely be one of the first ones to want to bring that to market or adapt it to.
You're just going to bounce off the walls, right? And everybody right now is in a subscription model. I sell software for a living, right? So it's, how do you get a repeatable invoice, I guess, from your customer? And thinking about your industry, we had a one-time transaction. If you had a piece that was a blockchain maintenance or a blockchain like support in terms of keeping my house 100% of what I've been doing to it over the last couple of years, what state it's in, there's a recurring charge for you in a support form there, right?
Sure, to be able to keep the record.
Who's going to be the first one to stand up there and say, I'll be your consultant, or I'll be your managed services provider to provide this extra value for you when you resell your house in 3 years?
Interesting.
Someone's going to do it.
Absolutely.
It's just a matter of who's going to think it's worth the investment.
That's interesting. So before we shift away from crypto, anything else crypto related? Because obviously, the next thing I want to talk about is NFTs. Same universe, different world. Anything else on crypto that you wanted to touch on?
No, that was our good transition. And then I got one more example for you that might even be more tangible in terms of making NFTs make sense here as we get into it.
Perfect. So again, dumb it down for me. What is an NFT? I'll ask that, then I'll preface it with how I understand it to be. And we've talked about some other stuff with it, which I'll dive into, but on its blanket level, an NFT as it started, to me, the layman, is, I get to own the digital copy of this picture. There's millions of digital copies of that picture. What's the value in owning that one and not a picture of that picture? Whatever the case may be, in my mind, it's like, just seems like fugazi. Now, some of the stuff you brought up before, which you'll touch on, does have some value. But as it started, that's all it seemed to be. Well, you own the digital rights to an image. That's my understanding of it. Tell me I'm right, wrong, break it down.
You're pretty right. Depending on how they issue the NFTs, you're going to take ownership of that digital asset, right? So think of it as you buying a painting in real life. Are you buying the original and distribution rights with that? Or are you just buying a print or a copy that you want to put on your wall? Your print's going to be $75, $150 based on the size you want versus that original, and you negotiating with the artist to you be able to sell those prints and make money off it on the back end. You own that digital asset, or you own that reproduction right of that painting. So you get to choose in terms of that, how much or how little value you want to put on the NFT.
But isn't the flex on me owning a Van Gogh that you can walk into my house and see my Van Gogh or my Picasso? Isn't that why most hardos that invest in art and things of that is to say that I have it and be able to have you walk into my house and show it? Am I supposed to say, yeah, I own this in NFT, check it out?
People are using it for their profile picture across all of their social medias. Like that'll be your online persona is your NFT that you own.
So what's to keep me though from taking that image and saying that I'm my own if it can't be validated?
What stops you from going and buying a fake Rolex?
Nothing.
Right? It's the same game, right? Like you could have a real Rolex and have it value to it, or you could just go photocopy a picture off the internet and say that you own it.
So let's transition into where you had mentioned when we were doing the deal on your house, the value of NFT as it comes to real estate. And this is where I think it absolutely makes a ton of sense. So dive into that.
We kind of just got into it right there on the last question, right? But it's how do you take these assets that you have that are traditionally relying on heavy paperwork or you having a safe in your living room to process that transaction and get that all off of your back, right? Like if you're going to pay property taxes every year, I just got my mailer, and where did that go? I opened the envelope up, I put the invoice in my safe, right? In my file cabinet. I don't like that, right? As a 28-year-old, I don't want anything to do with that, right? So everything else I have is saved on my computer, is saved in digitally. I scan my pictures in, I got it on the iCloud. Why do I want a safe with all of that information there? I'll give you the transition point because this might be a little more tangible. And one of the other ideas that I think is fantastic and I'm waiting for somebody to do, but you're a sports guy, me too, right? So we grew up going to baseball games, and when I'd come home, I'd keep all my ticket stubs, and I had a little photo album that I would slide them all in to remember what games I went to. The last 5-10 years with Ticketmaster coming in, all you get are those little printouts, or you get a digital ticket on your phone, right? Mm-hmm. So I've been to a couple games at Lambeau. I've been to a bowl game down in Florida over the last couple of years. I got no tangible evidence of that happening, right? So when you think about NFTs or like these non-fungible tokens, where still on the blockchain, similar experience to what we were talking about with the transactions, or if I want to change hands with this thing, I can sell you a 1-on-1, or I can sell you a 1 of 100 NFT. If we did that, or we tied it back to your sports tickets, like you can have an online collection of all the games that you went to, of tickets or of NFTs that were issued to you from the sporting event or from the team, that you can now have a catalog of and go look back and say, hey, this is all the things I've done over the last 3 years. Not a ton of value to the real world on that example right there. But imagine you go to the Bulls game 6, or you go to the Jordan flu game, and you have that sideline ticket where they're issuing the 1 of 10 NFT. Does that have value to somebody else that wasn't at that game? Now you're the 1 of 10 NFT owner that's tied back to that specific game. You can keep that as your collectible, as your little memoir of the game you went to. Or shoot, they made that a video of him hitting that elbow jumper, and that's the NFT. And now you guys have 1 of 10 of the original copies of that to sell and do with as you please.
That's interesting. Obviously, one of the poster boys for NFTs, Jake Paul, when it came out, he came out to a UFC or WWE or something with a Pokemon NFT or something necklace. I have, again, no idea. Outside the scope of thing. I mean, I care, but not care enough. So he's a fanboy, or one of the poster boys, of it. I think an article came out in the last week or so that he has 2.6 million that he bought into NFTs that is now estimated to be worth around 900,000. One specific example, he bought it 623,000. It's now worth $10. Back to the volatility of stuff. Touch on that. Anything else you know that I might be wrong about? Obviously, I'm just reading a headline to get that information. that and the volatility of it and why something like that transpired.
They made a lot of money on the front end of that before they lost the money on the back end, those guys, right? Because we were sitting there watching them do their podcast and talking about buying those NFTs for $300,000 and selling them for $1 million 48 hours later, right? So
their revenue was generated through their YouTube, etc.
They did just fine on those NFTs, even though they're taking a little bit of a bath right now. So
Sure.
I don't feel too bad for them in that sense. But we can transition it to, Gary Vee, obviously. Yep. I sent you the text when you posted that on your Instagram the other day. He saw that the NFT thing was happening, right? He's a cutting edge dude. He issued a Gary V NFT, and like V and Friends, I believe it was what it was called. And he did a little tricky thing when he issued his, like, how it's blockchain, you can, every time it changes hands, there's a transaction fee, it's dollars. He wrote into his blockchain that every time that asset or that digital asset changes hands, he gets a cut of the sale, regardless of how many times it changes hands down the line, right? So back to the real estate example, and the reason I kind of got into this line of questioning is back to the managed services of your blockchain. Who says that you don't have a $10 million house up on the mountain in PV that you put all this stuff up and then you write a 1% bump into it on a margin every time the thing sells for the blockchain owner?
Because you're not only selling the real estate, but you're selling the blockchain and the NFT or the history, the digital history of that you own as well.
Yep.
So you're selling that in addition to the real property. And that can have a guaranteed income for the remainder of the life of that digital asset.
This is all green grass in front of us, right? Like these are all ideas out of my head, right? So nobody's put pen to paper on any of this stuff, but it's going to be interesting to see how somebody capitalizes on it because there is money out there to do it. And then when you write the smart contract originally and put a 1% bump in for the hold, not the asset holder, but the institution behind it, are we back to not being decentralized and back to our original conversation?
Yeah.
Right. It's a never ending cycle as to how have we not adopted this thing yet? And why is it not in everybody's hands? Right.
So with what we've seen in NFT, is that forever crippling or is that just, hey, that avenue of whatever that was isn't going to be how this works. This is now how you're going to make money in NFT.
And NFTs were a unique and very creative use of the blockchain, right? And I didn't think that art was going to be the next place that it put its finger on. The smart contract stuff is so appealing to me that the putting it into NFTs and just how much draw they can have on the art side of it. I think that was gassed by popularity of streamers or influencers, right? Is they have so much influence over their groups and telling you to buy SafeMoon. It's the same thing, right? If I tell you that you can buy this NFT and then in 3 months or 6 months, now that this is a limited offering and now nobody can buy them anymore, the price can only go up. It's a speculative investment on the outside. I don't think a ton of people were buying NFTs to hold on to the NFT. A lot of them were chasing cash.
Sure. Yeah. Get the run up and cash out and be done with it.
And it was inevitable that we were going to end up here with the NFT stuff because it was a rocket ship to the moon and it's too hot. It's going to burn up in space, right?
Sure.
So it's going to have to readjust and figure out what made sense from an NFT standpoint and how is that going to grow and restructure or refoundationalize itself to go back out.
Yeah. And I love everything you're saying as all this relates to real estate. I think is awesome. And I think makes a ton of sense. And I think it's absolutely going to happen. It's just going to be a matter of who can put it together and roll it out first and then make it sustainable to where it's something that doesn't burn up immediately.
Well, and with all the institutional investment that's happening kind of quietly behind the scenes, Fidelity, BlackRock buying in, who knows that doesn't just get mandated from top down when somebody buys in, right?
Sure.
It's going to be, I don't think it's going to be somebody that starts a company from scratch that makes this change.
So when you, let's fast forward a little bit and say this stuff doesn't, you figure out a way individually to create a blockchain on your home or an NFT on your home or whatever it is before it becomes a mainstream thing. First off, do you have the ability to do that in all your intellect? Is that something in your skill set? And second off, is that something, let's say we're selling your house and buying a new one in 3 years. Are you going to try to sell an NFT or will you be able to have something like that along with your house to try to test the waters? Or is that just completely, am I talking out my ass? I have no idea what I'm talking about.
No, I mean, it's not terribly hard off. Issuing the NFT is not hard. Picking which protocol you want to run and putting your house on the blockchain, not terribly difficult, right? It's the is it worth anything to anybody conversation on the other side of it.
Sure.
If I knew which in the house I live in is probably going to be a starter first house for somebody again, and it might be somebody who's 22 to 25 right now in 3-5 years trying to buy it, they have a different outlook on this kind of stuff than even I do, right?
Sure.
And I got to imagine I was one of the first customers we worked with that justified their down payment with crypto assets.
Yeah. I mean, I had a handful last year, and on my end, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the powers that be initially had no idea what to do with it. And then they figured it out, and basically it's, hey, you got to convert it to USD, move it into your bank account. And then we've got to track that transaction. So as far as using it to buy a house, relatively easy. Now, I've also had other realtors come to me and be like, hey, I've got a guy who wants to buy a house straight crypto with no financing. I have no idea where to start on this. And I had no idea what direction to point him into. So,
I mean, it's the same game, right? As a guy comes to the table and wants to buy his house in Bitcoin, you're going to put that Bitcoin transaction on the blockchain somewhere. What other information do you want to include with that to justify the purchase of that house?
Super interesting stuff. Kind of bringing these two things together. And the last thing, and I didn't even tell you I wanted to ask about this one because I just thought about it this morning. And we saw all this kind of ramp up and happen simultaneously to the NFT and the crypto over the last year. The metaverse real estate, people are I don't even know, building a house on the metaverse and then turning around and selling it on the metaverse. What the hell is this? How does it make any freaking sense? And is this a bunch of people thinking that we're going to be plugged into the matrix and all living digitally at some point, so they want to be at the ground level of owning real estate?
It sounds like that, right? That one does not make any sense to me. Why would you buy real estate in a infinitely expansive place?
Sure.
Like it's not like here where there's lakefront property is going to run out, or like be within the 101 loop in Scottsdale. There's only a certain amount of houses you can build in that area. Why would you ever buy digital real estate when they can just be like, all right, we're going to make another 30-acre block right behind you?
Is that still a thing? Are people still doing this?
It makes so little sense to me that I kind of laughed it off and didn't dig into it. So I could be looking with like I have some egg on my face here, and somebody listening on here is going to say, you have no idea what you're talking about, Derek. But
well, if somebody sees that, put it in the comments and let us know.
To me, the metaverse real estate piece still has made no sense to me. The metaverse itself, where we could walk into a virtual Nike store and go buy virtual Nikes and try them on off the wall with augmented reality. There's a place for that in my life for sure. Like not having to go to the mall and just do all my online shopping instead of shopping in those little squares, go into the metaverse and pull a digital product off a shelf.
So have you gone into the metaverse?
I have not.
Me neither. Is it all through? I have an Oculus. My wife got me an Oculus like a year and a half ago. I'll be honest. I've used it for boxing games, and I love the Topgolf game on there. I am dialed in on Topgolf on my Oculus. But for the average person, if I went home today and threw my Oculus on, how difficult is it for me to say, I'm going to go walk around the metaverse today?
It's still so immature. Like it's on a 2-year journey at this point, right? Like when are we going to switch people from going home and playing Call of Duty all night in a party with their buddies to going into the metaverse and playing games inside of there? When is that going to be like a tipping point for a user? I don't know, right? I can tell you from my experience, right? I've lived in Arizona now. I've spent a bunch of time in Minnesota and a bunch of time in New Hampshire. So my friend group is split all the way across the country. The way I stay in touch with those guys is we jump on Xbox, play FIFA, we play Call of Duty. We don't even so much play the game as much as we just sit and talk to each other, and I catch up about how their kids are, what they've been up to the last couple of weeks, because 3-hour time change, we don't get them on the phone very often, right? Sure. I get them at 9:00 after they put the kids down, play an hour or two of games and figure out what's going on. Replace that video game with the metaverse, and now it's Wii Sports, or we go bowling, or we're going and walking a golf course, or we're doing the same thing, but we're not playing. The vehicle is not Call of Duty anymore. The vehicle is the metaverse. I don't see any reason that change doesn't happen.
It's so interesting. And again, I would love to go and take a stroll around the metaverse. Any idea how, can I just throw on my Oculus and download an app and go into it?
I'm not even going to go into it. I know so little about this that I can't
good. At least we both don't know something. All right, man. Well, anything else? I know we went down a lot of little rabbit holes and you came ultra prepared. Is there anything of value or something that you would like to leave the viewers and listeners with in regards to any of this stuff, or what to keep their head on a swivel about, or for something that they're interested in, maybe a direction to point them like, hey, start your research here?
Not financial advice, first disclaimer, obviously, right? I'm sticking with Ethereum and Bitcoin and seeing what the Fidelities and the BlackRocks and the big institutions are going to do over the next 6 months, right? I think there's still rough roads in front of us in terms of putting all your money into this as an investment right now, with it being a speculative asset, and we haven't had the hedge against the stock market like we'd hoped.
Mm-hmm.
I still got it as 25% of my retirement investment or my long-term investments, but I'm not buying as heavily as I probably should be at this price point. So we're in a spot where 3, 4, 6 months ago, everybody was looking at 50, 60K being like, dang, I wish I jumped in. We got this Ethereum merge. That was at $4,000. We're at $1,400, $1,300 on that. There's a value play in there on all these coins. I just think it's getting worse before it gets better.
Where does somebody start if they want to start researching it or start to dabble in buying it? What's the easiest path or the path of least resistance for somebody?
I'm going to get my wrist slapped by the hardcores online, but I would say download Coinbase or one of the major exchanges, Coinbase being my recommendation, because they have a learn platform on there where you can actually go and earn crypto and some of your smaller altcoins, even some of the bigger ones, by sitting through little training sessions and them educating you on what's happening with these coins. You can go into that platform, click on the Ethereum page or click on the Bitcoin page and read a full description of what the coin is, what it's trying to do, and then look at the historical performance of it based on what information you have just strictly from downloading the Coinbase app and not putting any money into it.
Has it become easier to buy some of these altcoins? So for instance, when I bought SafeMoon, like I'm shocked that I figured out how to do it. And I literally, if I had to sell it, I don't even know. I had to go into X exchange, upload money to X wallet, go into X exchange, purchase X coin, go into a different exchange and exchange that coin for SafeMoon. Like it was chaotic. And I remember I saved like screenshots of like everything I was doing, because I'm like, in the event that this blows up and I want to sell it, make some money, I'm gonna have to figure out how the hell to do it.
Right.
Has that become easier, or are you still seeing these alt products that it's still just as difficult to try to find your way into it?
It's an interesting question to answer because it's anecdotal on my side, right? But the more hoops that you have to jump through, the shadier investment I feel it is, right? Because if you were doing things straight up and you had a great white paper, why would Coinbase or any of these major exchanges not take you on as a trading partner? If you're going to make you jump through a couple hoops, send you to a smaller exchange based out of somewhere in Europe or somewhere that's not North America based, is there a reason that they're doing that?
Sure. Another, I guess, follow-up question on that is, obviously your crypto is all kept in a digital wallet, and I believe you need like a digital key and so on and so forth. There's no password recovery, things like that. I think there was a story like a year ago. Some guy had this millions in Bitcoin and had 9 wrong tries on his password. It was on his 10th. And if he fucked up the 10th, it was going to go away forever.
Gonzo. Yeah.
So, but at this point, it's still gone forever if you can never access it.
You can't access it. Yeah. It's a double-edged sword. And I actually, at the risk of probably some of the security of what's going on right now, because I'm with Coinbase. I told you that already, right? So they're one of the biggest in the game. Mm-hmm. I'm not really worried about them going insolvent, but some of these other ones where they're smaller exchanges, like where you bought your SafeMoon, if they run out of money and your coins aren't on that hard wallet that you downloaded them away from their exchange, they're not your coins anymore, right?
So interesting.
It's part of like paying back your investors when you go bankrupt. Like same play as if a stock, right?
Yep.
So you hear about 4 or 5 exchanges that became insolvent because they were so heavily leveraged in Luna, and that crashed to zero. And now they had built their whole lattice up on one coin, and it was supposed to be a stable, and it collapsed, right? So now they have no money, and everybody that was holding their coins inside of the exchange, there's no money left, right? So you hear about that happening at a couple exchanges. Crypto.com is in the news this week because of rumored they laid off 20,000 people, but they're putting out press releases and saying that's not true. Crypto.com is the one who's advertising on our NFL games, right? So where's that line, or where's that sword fall between mass adoption and having to do this massive pullback versus Fidelity giving them investment money, and investors are not looking at GameStop and AMC again
Sure,
instead of this, right?
It's bananas. This is something that shit, we might have to have you reoccurring every 6 months or something to continue to learn about this. Well, anything else? Any other tidbits for anybody?
Good to go. I'm still buying. I guess I'll leave you with that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for tuning in and listening. We'll catch you next month and hope you enjoyed the Prospect Podcast.